After he was born, I held him for 5 minutes. Does the love you have for baby Eric surprise you? The world watched in stunned silence as Simon Cowell left the Britain's Got Talent stage for the last time. I actually asked Lauren in before, what if I like the dogs more than him? As he declared his immediate departure from television, his voice broke with emotion. At the pinnacle of his career, the man who had ruled the entertainment business for decades was retiring, and millions of followers would be devastated to learn the rationale behind his startling choice. Simon had to make the most difficult decision of his life due to the catastrophic medical prognosis of his 11-year-old son, Eric. Everything changed when Simon learned about Eric's health from the physicians, an era that no one anticipated would come to an end with the entertainment mogul's tearful farewell. The diagnosis that made all the difference. In September 2025, the morning that rocked Simon Cowell's world started out like any other Tuesday. Only a father's trained eye could notice the slight shift in Eric's behavior, along with what appeared to be typical childhood growing pains, periodic headaches, and moments of disorientation. At first, Simon had ascribed these symptoms to the inherent difficulties that accompanied Eric's diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder. However, he started to have concerns as the symptoms worsened and new ones appeared. The purpose of the visit to London's specialized neurological clinic was preventative. Simon had pressed for the most thorough testing possible, enlisting the help of medical experts worldwide to guarantee Eric had the finest treatment possible. Over the course of several days, the neurological exams, blood tests, and MRI scans became increasingly complicated. Despite his calm demeanor throughout the medical procedures, Simon's loved ones could see the strain in his face and the way his hands trembled when he believed no one was watching. The medical center's meeting room felt like the coldest spot on earth as the results were announced. No parent should ever have to hear the news that the team of experts brought. According to Eric's brain scans, he had a rare degenerative neurological disorder that would gradually impair his motor skills, cognitive capacities, and life expectancy. It was especially harsh because the illness, which affects less than 1 in a million children, targeted kids who were already struggling with developmental issues. According to the experts, Eric was especially susceptible to this debilitating illness because of his distinct brain composition, which was already altered by his autism. It was heartbreakingly ironic. The very distinctions that set Eric apart. I have a tea for Eric as well. Simon listened as doctors described experimental medications, treatment possibilities, and the fact that Eric's condition would worsen even with the greatest care money could buy. The realization that Eric would have less time to make special memories, pick up new skills, and enjoy life broke Simon's heart the most. More quickly than anyone had expected, the opportunity for father-son outings, silent discussion, and shared experiences was closing. Eric's future wasn't the only thing altered by the diagnosis. It destroyed Simon's meticulously crafted plan to see his kid mature into adulthood. Simon felt as though he had been physically struck by the weight of this information. This went beyond simply changing expectations or controlling a condition. This had to do with acknowledging that his cherished son would have to face an uncertain and deteriorating future. He was abruptly forced to make the most difficult choice of his life, the secret Simon concealed from the world. Simon Cowell became a master of deception for weeks after Eric's diagnosis, keeping up his public image while inside, collapsing under the weight of the heartbreaking news. As the Britain's Got Talent filming went on, millions of spectators saw Simon make his usual sarcastic comments and criticisms, totally oblivious to the fact that beneath his self-assured facade was a father whose entire life had been upended. The energy it took to keep up this facade was draining. Simon would withdraw to his dressing room in between takes, looking at pictures of Eric on his phone, examining his son's face for indications of the development that the doctors had told him was coming. Simon needed extra concealer under his eyes every day, the makeup crew noted. Evidence of restless evenings spent reading medical papers that gave little hope and studying experimental remedies. Those who knew Simon well noticed tiny but major changes in his conduct, which production helpers started to notice. During filming, the man known for his meticulousness and attention to detail started making unusual errors. He would occasionally look off into space as though his mind were somewhere completely different, forget candidates' names, and stop talking in the middle of sentences. Simon's assistant began to get strange requests, consultations with experts in nations that most people couldn't pronounce, meetings with medical researchers, and last-minute trip plans to hospitals that specialize in uncommon pediatric diseases. As Simon attempted to juggle his professional responsibilities with an increasingly desperate quest for information regarding Eric's illness, the normally orderly timetable descended into chaos. Simon's relationship with contestants, who reminded him of Eric, was the most revealing indication of his internal conflict. The normally shrewd language judge was particularly lenient toward children and young adults who showed any kind of neurodiversity or special needs. His critique shifted from being scathing to being helpful. He gave constructive criticism rather than amusing remarks. On the background, Simon was discreetly selling off assets and reinvesting his enormous fortune on new therapies and medical research. In order to finance what had become his sole goal, figuring out how to halt or cure Eric's condition, properties were sold, company interests were cashed out, and entire segments of his entertainment empire were reorganized. Every element of Simon's life suffered as a result of the loneliness that comes with concealing such a terrible secret while pursuing a public job. It made me a little nervous, but within 2 seconds, friends noted that he was not attending social events, that he was reluctant to prepare for the future, and that he had developed the new habit of cutting people off when they brought up family or future-related subjects. Simon's breaking moment. The tipping point occurred in late October 2025 during a live taping of Britain's Got Talent. A young performer with autism had just concluded an incredible musical performance that had the crowd standing up. In what would subsequently be referred to be the show's most emotionally raw moment. And something inside Simon exploded as he was about to give his criticism. The candidate, who was just 12 years old, had the same laser-like focus and distinct viewpoint that Simon had seen in Eric. Simon noticed his own son's face reflected back at him as the youngster stood on stage, beaming with pleasure at his achievement. Simon was struck with the overpowering awareness that Eric might never get to enjoy such moments of delight and victory. The precise moment Simon lost his cool was caught on television cameras. His normally assured demeanor faltered. Tears that he had been suppressing for weeks suddenly started to fall down his cheeks, and his hands started to shake visibly. The live crowd became silent as they realized that something more significant than the typical drama of a talent competition was taking place. Simon was unable to move or speak for almost 30 seconds, as the weight of Eric's diagnosis fell upon him like a tidal wave. The production crew and other judges watched in disbelief, as the man, who was renowned for his unwavering confidence, seemed to vanish before their very eyes. Every moment of weakness from a man who had made his career out of being unflappable was captured by the cameras as they kept rolling. When Simon did manage to speak, it was no more than a whisper, and his words seemed to be born out of intense personal suffering rather than duty. His criticism of the young competitor was unlike anything he had ever said on TV. It was intensely intimate, emotionally charged, and tense, as if he were talking to someone he might not see again. When Simon excused himself from the set, production was stopped, leaving the audience perplexed, and the production crew trying to figure out what had happened. That moment's video would go on to become some of the most seen and emotionally stirring shows in television history. However, it would take a long time for viewers to realize its actual significance. Simon made the call that would alter everything in his dressing room. Simon's announcement of his abrupt departure from all broadcast commitments caught his business manager off guard, as he was expecting to talk about scheduling difficulties or contract discussions. There were no talks, no explanations, no gradual transition, just a straightforward announcement that his entertainment career was terminated. With immediate effect, the empire of entertainment falls apart. The entertainment business was rocked by Simon Cowell's announcement of his immediate resignation, which had an impact on entire continents. There was an instant dilemma for television networks that had based their programming on Simon's shows. The man who had founded several television brands on his own was abruptly leaving a trail of upheaval in his wake, with billions of dollars in advertising revenue and foreign distribution deals on the line. Television networks in America and Europe had emergency board meetings as executives attempted to understand the financial ramifications of Simon's abrupt departure. His shows Britain's Got Talent, The X Factor, America's Got Talent, and many others in other countries constituted a media empire that brought in hundreds of millions of pounds every year. Leaders in the industry were forced to find answers after the key player, who had established and cared for these properties, was abruptly removed. The aspirations of contestants, who had been training for future seasons, were abruptly called into question. Production enterprises that had thousands of employees were at risk of project cancellations and layoffs. International broadcasters wanted answers and contract renegotiations after paying hefty license fees for Simon's formats. Many of Simon's business associates had based their careers on his leadership and vision, but they were abruptly dropped. Unfinished projects and unmet commitments that reflected years of preparation and investment were left behind when the man who had been renowned for his loyalty and long-term business connections appeared to disappear overnight. Beyond television, the music business was also affected, with Simon's record labels and artist management firms unsure about their future course. Recording artists who had grown under Simon's tutelage were left in a state of uncertainty, uncertain as to whether their contracts and ambitions for their careers would still be viable under the new management. Industry insiders saw Simon's total disengagement from all business communications to be the most startling. The man who had been available around the clock and who had established his reputation by actively participating in every facet of his business abruptly stopped being reachable. No one answered the phone. Even his closest business associates were unable to get in touch with him, and emails were ignored. As investors attempted to gauge the impact of losing one of the most prominent people in the entertainment industry, financial markets responded quickly to the news of Simon's retirement, causing companies in the sector to experience notable volatility. His numerous properties' uncertain futures caused a chain reaction that affected everything from music sales to television ratings. In the meanwhile, Simon was systematically deconstructing the company he had spent decades creating, turning assets into cash that could be used for Eric's medical treatment and condition research. The opportunity to save his son was completely sacrificing the entertainment industry that had brought him fame. The frantic pursuit of hope. After giving up his profession in entertainment, Simon Cowell set out on a global quest that stretched the limits of medical knowledge and used every resource available to him. His whole fortune, which he had amassed during decades of success on television, was now focused on finding a cure, a therapy, or even simply more time for his son, Eric. Simon traveled by private jet to medical centers in nations that were unfamiliar to most people, in order to confer with researchers who focused on uncommon neurological disorders in children. His search was fueled by desperation, which took him to innovative research facilities in Japan, experimental treatment institutes in Switzerland, and covert medical practices in nations with LAX regulatory monitoring. Simon's strategy for securing Eric's assistance was similar to his strategy for creating his entertainment business: aggressive, thorough, and not afraid to take chances that others might not. He basically purchased his way into the world's most elite medical circles, funded entire research initiatives, and gave funds to colleges studying related problems. Simon's priorities underwent a drastic and abrupt change. Once fixated on television ratings and contract minutiae, the man now dedicated his days to reading medical journals and going to pediatric neurology conferences. He started using complicated medical terms instead of entertainment industry lingo, which he learned with the same fervor he had used to find new talent. Healthcare providers were faced with a patient that was unlike any they had ever seen. Opportunities for cooperation that would not have otherwise arisen were made possible by Simon's mix of enormous financial resources, contacts in the entertainment industry, and intense parental affection. Massive capital infusions were used to revive research initiatives that had been put on hold because of a lack of funding. Simon visited establishments at the forefront of medical knowledge as part of the global hunt for answers, locations where experimental remedies that would not be accessible to the general public for years or decades were being created. There was hope in some of these treatments. Some turned out to be dead ends. Simon, however, was unrelentingly determined to explore every possibility. His interest in funding research went beyond therapies that could benefit Eric. In particular, seeing that his kid would ultimately benefit from advances in related fields, Simon started funding more extensive research into uncommon genetic diseases, autism spectrum disorders, and pediatric neurological ailments. With little fanfare, the Simon Cowell Medical Research Foundation was founded, directing millions of dollars toward long underfunded initiatives. This quest has a huge emotional cost. Every promising lead that didn't work out, every experimental treatment that didn't produce any outcomes. Simon's burden was increased by each researcher who eventually had to break the awful news. As possible answers proved elusive, the hope that motivated his inquiry also served as the source of ongoing heartache. The Last Farewell Show. In entertainment history, November 15, 2025, will always be remembered as the night Simon Cowell performed for the last time. Production teams worked around the clock to create a special edition of Britain's Got Talent that paid tribute to Simon's surprise departure, but the audience was unaware that they were seeing the end of an era. Farewell deserving of his televised services. From the time Simon took the stage, the emotional weight of the event was evident. Something more measured and methodical had taken the place of his customary confident swagger. The audience sensed something different in their favorite judge, but they were unable to pinpoint the change, as if he was enjoying every moment and attempting to commit the experience to memory. As several artists performed to pay tribute to Simon's legacy throughout the evening, cameras caught intimate moments that demonstrated the extent of his emotional metamorphosis. Simon's poise would falter a little when young competitors who reminded him of Eric performed, revealing glimmers of the deep sorrow he was harboring. When Simon was asked to speak directly to the crowd and discuss his retirement and future plans, it was the most impactful moment. What came out was a father talking about love, family, and the things that really matter in life from a place of genuine emotion, rather than the self-assured entertainment magnate the world had known. Simon's remarks that evening were deliberately crafted to both praise his career and allude to the personal issue that had prompted his retirement. He talked about the value of spending quality time with loved ones, the honor of seeing spectacular talent, and the responsibility that comes with being able to impact others. Following Simon's parting speech, the crowd and other artists were unable to control their emotions throughout the several minute standing ovation. Afterwards, many attendees talked about feeling as though they were seeing something momentous. However, they were not quite aware of the personal tragedy that had led to Simon's departure. Behind the scenes, Simon's longtime collaborators, the production crew, were having a hard time controlling their own feelings. The guy who had fueled their careers and given many people in the entertainment industry opportunity was leaving everything he had worked so hard to establish. Simon stayed on stage for a few minutes after the cameras stopped and the crowd started to leave the studio, standing by himself beneath the lights that had lighted up his career for so long. Security camera footage of those last moments of solitude, which were never aired, showed a man bidding farewell to both his work and an unattainable version of himself. The mission and secret foundation. Simon Cowell quietly laid the groundwork for one of the most important medical research foundations in modern history, in the months after he announced his retirement. However, its presence and extent were not widely known outside of the medical community. The majority of Simon's wealth from the entertainment sector was donated to the Eric Cowell Foundation for Pediatric Neurological Research, which committed more than £30 million to the hunt for cures for uncommon pediatric illnesses. The foundation focused solely on results rather than recognition or publicity, and it operated with a level of confidentiality that was uncommon in the philanthropic sector. Simon's strategy for financing medical research was similar to his strategy for producing entertainment. He demanded quality, anticipated quick advancement, and was not afraid to take chances that more conventional funding sources wouldn't take. The organization allocated research grants to initiatives that showed the most potential for addressing a variety of uncommon juvenile neurological illnesses, in addition to Eric's particular ailment. Simon was aware that unanticipated findings in related subjects frequently resulted from advances in one field of study. His financial plan was therefore extensive and all-encompassing. Additionally, the foundation created a global communication network among scholars working on related issues, opening up hitherto unheard-of possibilities for collaboration. Scientists who had hitherto worked alone were abruptly joined by a worldwide team with previously unheard-of resources and assistance. Simon's personal commitment to the foundation's mission extended much beyond financial support. He participated in research meetings, went to medical conferences, and made connections with physicians and scientists who were trying to learn more about illnesses like Eric's. He had a complete and permanent metamorphosis, from entertainment tycoon to supporter of medical research. Every facet of the foundation's activities demonstrated the urgency with which its work was being conducted. Weeks, instead of months or years, were allotted for traditional grant rounds. Promising research initiatives were immediately given further support. Through all legal means, clinical trials were expedited through regulatory processes. The foundation's efforts were motivated by the agonizing realization that time was running out. Because of his health, any significant advancements had to be made fast in order to affect Eric's life. The research community experienced a sad and inspiring intensity as a result of the deadline strain. The foundation's influence went beyond only providing funds for studies aimed at giving families dealing with comparable diagnoses hope. Suddenly, parents of children with unusual diseases had access to experimental protocols and state-of-the-art treatments that they otherwise would not have had. It was turning Simon's own tragedy into a source of inspiration for others. The last chapter. By the end of 2025, Simon Cowell had undergone the most significant life change in entertainment history, turning from a TV star into a full-time father and supporter of medical research. His biggest purpose was now to support the experts, trying to comprehend his son's ailment, and to spend peaceful time with Eric. He had previously thrived on the bright lights and cheers of television studios, with his old show's ratings dropping, and rivals finding it difficult to replace the hole he left behind. Simon's absence was nevertheless felt in the entertainment world. The opportunity to spend limitless time with Eric during what medical experts had said might be their most valuable time together, however, seemed to outweigh these professional setbacks for Simon. It was terrible and amazing how Eric reacted to receiving his father's undivided attention. To the astonishment of everyone around him, the youngster, who had always been a little shy, started to open up. His diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder, which had previously appeared to be a communication barrier, became less important, as Simon started to recognize and value Eric's distinct perspective on the world. Simon and Eric developed a daily schedule that was specifically tailored to Eric's requirements and preferences, fostering a stable and predictable atmosphere that enabled the youngster to flourish in spite of his health issues. A parent who recognized the limited amount of time they might have together appreciated every activity, conversation, and shared experience. Simon had learned to handle the mix of hope and realities with remarkable grace, thanks to medical updates from Eric's treatment team. While some experimental treatments showed promise, and others did not, Simon remained steadfast in his determination to try every alternative. He had been as meticulous and focused in his approach to Eric's medical treatment as he had been in the establishment of his entertainment business. Simon's priorities have completely and permanently changed. Eric's smile, quiet moments of connection, and the awareness that he was doing everything he could to support his son's journey were now sources of significance for the guy who had previously defined success in terms of ratings, record sales, and commercial profits. Those who knew Simon prior to Eric's illness frequently commented on the significant shift in his attitude and mannerisms. Love and purpose had softened and shaped the jagged edges that had made him famous in the entertainment industry. His fabled impatience had given way to the kind of tenderness that Eric's illness demanded. As the year came to a close, Simon approached the future with a sense of acceptance and hope that very few people ever attain. Despite his difficulties, he had learned to enjoy the here and now and to value the special gifts that Eric gave their family, even as he continued to support research and explore every treatment option. One of the most potent tales of love overcoming selfish ambition in contemporary history is Simon Cowell's transformation from entertainment magnate to loving parent and supporter of medical research. He demonstrates what true success truly means by being willing to give up everything he had worked so hard to achieve in order to help his kid through an unthinkable medical crisis. How do you feel about Simon's amazing selflessness? Was it the proper decision for him to give up his entertainment business to devote all of his attention to Eric's care? With your own family, how would you respond to such an impossibility?